A little bit different than usual today. We are going to read a psalm responsively instead of having someone come up and read it for us. And then we will hear the gospel message. So let us read together Psalm 118, first two verses, and then verses 19 to 29. Oh, give thanks to God, for God is good. God's steadfast love endures forever.
Let Israel say, God's steadfast love endures forever.
Open me to the gates of righteousness, that I may enter through them and give thanks to God.
This is the gate of God. The righteous shall enter through it.
I thank you that you have answered me and have become my salvation.
The stone that the builders rejected has become
the chief cornerstone. This is God's doing. It is marvelous in our eyes. This is the day that God has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. Save us, we beseech you, O God. O God, we beseech you, give us success. Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord. We bless you from the house of God. The sovereign is God, and God has given us light. Bind the festal procession with branches up to the horns of the altar. You are my God, and I will give thanks to you. You are my God, I will extol you. Oh, give thanks to God, for God is good, for God's steadfast love endures forever. Our gospel reading today is from the Gospel of Matthew, the 21st chapter, the first 11 verses. This is the story of the procession into Jerusalem of Jesus and his disciples. When they had come near Jerusalem and had reached Bethphage at the Mount of Olives, Jesus sent two disciples, saying to them, Go into the village ahead of you, and immediately you will find a donkey tied and a colt with her. Untie them and bring them to me. If anyone says anything to you, just say this, The Lord needs them, and he will send them immediately. This took place to fulfill what had been spoken through the prophet, saying, Tell the daughter of Zion, Look, your king is coming to you, humble and mounted on a donkey and on a colt, the foal of a donkey. The disciples went and did as Jesus had directed them. They brought the donkey and the colt, and they put their cloaks on them, and he sat on them. A very large crowd spread their cloaks on the road, and others cut branches from the trees and spread them on the road. The crowds that went ahead of them and that followed were shouting, Hosanna to the Son of David! Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna in the highest heaven. When he entered Jerusalem, the whole city was in turmoil, asking, Who is this? The crowds were saying, This is the prophet Jesus from Nazareth in Galilee. May we hear and understand what the scriptures are teaching us today. So as we begin this sort of liturgical marathon of Holy Week, I wanted to make note of the fact that our scriptures are all framed by processions of one sort or another. We enter the week and we enter the story watching and cheering as Jesus passes by, and we don't just watch, we go with him, we join in the procession ourselves, we follow along, body, heart, mind, and spirit. And that's part of what our little romp around the sanctuary was earlier today. Just to call that to mind more than just by reading, but by actually experiencing and feeling some of those things. And then in the psalm, the one that we read responsively, we have a festal procession to the altar of sacrifice. The Lord is God, and he has given us light. Bind the festal procession with branches up to the horns of the altar. In that psalm that we read. And there was an epistle letter that we didn't read, and I'll probably read a little bit of it to you later, but in that particular reading, there's actually a quote of what was thought to be an old song, a hymn that was read also and sung in this time with Jesus. So today, most of the time with Palm Sunday, we join the celebration, we join the crowd, we shout Hosanna, we bid welcome to the one who comes in the name of the Lord. And most of all, and most importantly, we are reminded again that we join Jesus on the journey, and we follow Jesus. While I was writing the notes for this particular week, I was thinking back to a week in January when we had an inauguration of our 45th president. And now I haven't been to Washington, D.C. for years and years and years myself. I haven't been there. I was there as part of a youth orchestra one time, and I kind of zoomed through on my way somewhere else one time. But I haven't really visited the place for decades, literally decades. But I do have friends who have gone, and I have some friends who went to this year's inauguration. And I asked them about it, and I asked them to tell me sort of their story while they were there, and what did they experience. And they went on a little walking tour several days early. They went on foot, headed to the White House, and ultimately they were heading to the National Mall and the Smithsonian. And as they walked along, they told me that they noticed that the city had already begun, this was like at least a week ahead of time, the city had already begun preparing for the inauguration by installing bleachers along the streets. I'm sure we all saw videos of some of the bleachers, you know. And a large staging area where all of the ceremonies take place. There was orange plastic netting all over the place, getting everything ready. I've watched many inaugurations on television. I've never been there in person. I've watched many rose parades on television, and I have been there in person once, and I resolved never to try to go in person again. Anyway, another story. Right? I was 3, and I got too tired, and I hated it, so there we go. Anyway, my friend said that being in Washington, D.C. in the midst of preparing for the event gave them a whole different perspective on what takes place, because they mostly had watched on television too. They knew at some level, as did I, that this inauguration involved a parade. Never really think about it too much, but they told me that their own university band, University of Tennessee, these are friends of mine who teach out there. They're called, this is kind of funny because we have our Southland Symphony. The University of Tennessee band is called the Pride of the Southland. That's the name of it. They would be marching in this parade, and that's part of why they went, was to watch their university band. A lot of other bands, of course, were descending on the Capitol. So still, watching on TV, we don't really get much of a sense of that atmosphere. Mostly what we see is the action on the stage, you know, the inaugural stage. And I suppose I've watched that procession to the White House afterwards, but I don't think of the inauguration ceremony as primarily as a parade, but it really is. It's a transition of power from one president to another. And it's marked with a big parade. Dignitaries, members of the armed forces, marching bands, lots of things. For me, that reminder, as I thought about that whole thing of bringing a new leader, it's sort of an interesting juxtaposition to this story of the procession of Jesus. Lots of onlookers. The story's told by all 4 of the gospel writers. They all have their little twist on it, but all 4 of them recognize this. The inaugural procession follows the official swearing-in ceremony, and that's held in front of the Capitol building in the United States. The route takes the bands and the officials and the dignitaries, the servicemen and servicewomen, the newly inaugurated president and his family, straight down Pennsylvania Avenue. There's an official inaugural planning page, and it encourages the visitors to line up along the avenue to cheer the presidential procession and inaugural parade, to make all these cheers. It's not that much different, is it, than this event described by the gospel writer. He describes the plan for the procession. When they had come near Jerusalem and reached Bethel at the Mount of Olives, Jesus sent 2 disciples. They went and did this as he was directed. They brought the donkey and the colt. They put the cloaks on him. A large crowd spread the cloaks. So they tell us all of this stuff that was being done to prepare for this procession. They have them cheering on, Hosanna to the Son of David. Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna in the highest heaven. So when Jesus entered Jerusalem, the whole city is like, what's going on? Who is this? Who is that? Oh, that's the prophet Jesus. Several different things struck me about Matthew's story, though. Matthew has Jesus not riding on a donkey, but straddled across two beasts, a donkey and a colt, balancing kind of awkwardly on the cloaks. I really hadn't thought about that very much until I went through and looked at all the Gospels and went, wait a minute. This one has the mama donkey, I think they're called a jenny, right? And her foal, the colt. And they put the cloaks across them both. And it says he rode them. I thought, wow, that's kind of interesting. Big crowd, procession passes, people throw down their coats, they make a path for the man and the beast. And they're saying, who is it? Who is it? If you go to Jerusalem today, there's a lot of guided walks along this same area. You can take the processional. There's, on Palm Sunday, it's a huge internationally attended event. Right now, over there, there's a big procession, well, it probably already happened, but a big procession going on. And there are big instructions. The Catholic Palm Sunday procession, here's an instruction page, right? Will begin on the other side of the Mount of Olives at the Franciscan Church of Bethel, just below the Paternoster Church. The procession walks down to the Church of All Nations, and from there it continues. It passes St. Stephen's Gate, the Lion's Gate, to St. Anne's Church in the Old City. More than 25,000 pilgrims and an additional 35,000 line the route to greet the participants, and they have songs and blessings. It's one of the biggest events in Jerusalem of the whole year. So when I read about that, and I look at that, and I think about inviting you to march around the sanctuary singing Hosanna, we're not really just putting on a show, even though it's kind of fun. We're reenacting this event that happens all over the world. I'm certain that it's really, as fun as it can be, it's kind of a serious thing. Just as serious, if not more so, than a presidential inauguration. And just as the whole city of Jerusalem found themselves in turmoil on that day, likewise, we are in turmoil. The mood isn't just celebratory on this day, it's kind of ominous. I'm sure that my friends felt a similar sentiment. The city was preparing for turmoil. And honestly, that happens every time. Every time there's a change of president, no matter who is being inaugurated. It makes me wonder, as I was viewing the videos later that showed the parade route and the barricades and the things, how could it possibly be kept secure for those thousands and thousands and thousands of people, for the band, the dignitaries? How could everything be completely safe? Was it possible? Probably not. Thankfully, it ended up being safe. Right? But it probably isn't possible to guarantee it. Marches, whether it's the inauguration march, the women's march, the immigrant march, any march that's coming up or that has passed, they're probably not at all guaranteed to be safe. We tell our friends who participate, be safe. If we go ourselves, we do everything we possibly can to be safe. But anyone who participates in any public march or demonstration or shout out for justice is putting themselves at risk of it. The scene in Jerusalem, no matter which one you read, is chaotic. Thousands of people from all over the countryside were gathering there to celebrate Passover, the biggest deal of the whole year for them. They had come to the city not to watch a parade, but as pilgrims. I can't help but call to mind the other procession that was going on. There's two gates. There's the procession with Jesus, with the donkey and the common people. And then there's the procession with all the dignitaries going on at the other gate to Jerusalem, the stallion, the Roman governor, the soldiers, all of these people coming in and being very important and representing the authority of the time. Maybe we can envision the entry of Jesus as a parallel for us now, through our eyes of marching and being activists for justice. Maybe we can embrace the start of Holy Week as a call to a particular kind of discipleship, and maybe we can understand that this is really part of our covenant that we even have at our baptism, to accept the freedom and power God gives us to resist evil, injustice, and oppression in whatever forms they may present themselves. Because no matter where we stand on a political spectrum, to be a follower of Jesus means we are called to engage in acts of justice on behalf of the least, the lost, and the most vulnerable among us. It's true whether we're demonstrating for women's rights, for immigrants' rights, for economic justice, for anything. We're not supposed to remain spectators. We are actually to join that procession, just as we did this morning. We are to follow Jesus and the Spirit of God to wherever God's voice is calling us to go. For Jesus, it was Jerusalem. And we know the end of that story. The end of the week was not a happy week. But the beginning of the next was a triumph of that effort. Now, I'm going to show you something. And I picked this particular version. This is a song. I picked this particular version of the song because in it, all three verses of the song are sung. And so listen as you hear it. This is a video that I'm going to play. And I encourage you to listen to it and think about what was going on, because as much controversy as this originally had in its life, I think it has a message.
The rabble to be quiet, we anticipate a riot. This common crowd is much too loud. Tell them all who sing your song that they are fools and they are wrong. They are a curse, they should disperse.
Why waste your breath moaning at the crowd? Nothing can be done to stop the shouting. If every tongue was still, the noise would still continue. The rocks and stones themselves would start to sing. Sing me a song, but not for me alone. Sing out for yourselves, for you are blessed. There is not one of you who cannot win the kingdom. The slow, the suffering, the quick, the dead.
The last verse, you hear the ominousness of the crowd starting to turn. JC, won't you die for me? When we follow him into his confrontation with those powers of the day, the ones entering by the other gate, we have to find courage too. Courage to speak truth to power, courage to stand by the hymns of our faith. The one we didn't read today, Philippians, tells us, let the same mind be in you that was in Christ Jesus, who, though he was in the form of God, did not regard equality with God as something to be exploited, but emptied himself, taking the form of a slave, being born in human likeness, and being found in human form, he humbled himself and became obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. That could be the end, but the rest of the verse says, therefore God also exalted him and gave him the name that is above every name, so that at the name of Jesus every knee should bend, and in heaven and earth and under the earth, and every tongue should confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. Christians, Jews, followers of Jesus' disciples have been participating in public processions of a variety of forms since early Christianity to now. Some of them are things like Palm Sunday processions, sort of a religious parade. Another type is a pilgrimage. And the final type might be the more recent vintage, the social witness march. I'm hoping that as we continue to participate in all of those, that we get that energy and that excitement that we just saw in the Hosanna, Hosanna, and that we use that to follow God and God's Spirit and to be the church and do all of those things. Protect the environment, care for the poor, forgive often, reject racism, fight for the powerless, share earthly and spiritual resources, embrace diversity, love God, and enjoy this life. Let's join the procession. Amen.